pointing at me?
This was your idea.
Okay. Hey, guys.
What about girls? How dare you use pronouns?
True.
My bad. Hi, people and other things on the internet.
Other kins.
Well, ew, no. Welcome.
You don't get to listen.
You don't get to listen to this podcast. We banned you from this. Welcome to the Free Rotation podcast. I'm your host for this week, and I'm joined by Chris and Angie.
Hello.
Hola.
And today we are talking about our brand newest idea for things. It's the book club. This was a very well prepared opening by me, I would like to say.
I mean, you've got it fully written out.
I did a great
You
job.
had your press secretary write it? Nice.
But yeah, we're talking about our new book club, guys, because we like to read. And if you don't like to read, then I guess you're not going to read these books, but we're going to talk about them anyways. So yeah, go forth and let's talk about books, guys. You picked a really good book, Chris.
Well, let's
So when Gutenberg built the printing press and...
Exactly. Well, let's first talk about why we like to read and why we think people should read more.
Oh, that's nice. You know what? Maybe you should have hosted this episode. You were the English major.
That's true. So please don't send me bad fan fiction. Can't handle it.
Yeah, that's in like 2 episodes we'll be sending you.
No.
But yeah, that's true. Like, why do we like to read? What makes some people enjoy reading versus other people who think reading is really stupidly boring?
Oh, they're both looking at me like I have the answer. I actually enjoy...
Chris, you generally have an answer.
I do. I actually really do enjoy reading fiction, nonfiction, biographies, pretty much anything I can get my hands on, because I like to learn things. I like to know more today than I did yesterday about pretty much anything you're willing to teach me or I'm willing to read about. Be it math problems, physics, history, even... I mean, I try to read some sci-fi. I just don't get into a lot of nonfiction. It's just not my cup of tea usually. But I do give a lot of it a shot. Some writers I just can't deal with. It just is what it is.
I think it boils down, especially for me, if it's something I'm interested in. I think it's a learning thing too, but I like to have just my imagination going crazy half the time, and reading kind of lessens that, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It helps kind of put a foundation down, and I can picture the stories in my head. It's weird. It's it's almost like a moving movie. It's like words moving in a movie in my head almost. So I think it's very entertaining wholesomeness, I guess. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I like, when I was a kid, I liked reading because it took me out of my life. It took me into this whole other world where I could just forget everything. Mm. So I read thousands of books when I was a kid. But in the same token, I also learned a lot because it teaches you words.
Yeah.
And, proper grammar and usage, as well as different perspectives. So think back to when you read, it slipped my mind just that fast, The Grapes of Wrath. Mm-hmm. And you'd never know about that side of life unless you read about it, because it's not like we've experienced it.
Right.
I'm not a migrant grape worker.
Exactly.
Unfortunately.
Or any of the The Color Purple, and reading about any sort of segregated or downtrodden,
just other people's perspectives
race,
that you'll never encounter.
I think you could think that with A Tale of Two Cities, even though that is a very dense book. If you enjoyed it, it gave you a lot of perspective to the French Revolution.
Right.
Boring as shit.
I actually really liked it, but I think it was because instead of it looking at the perspective of objectively the historic nature of what happened with the French Revolution, it was giving perspective as to what was going on, because the big outset of it was what was happening in France at the time, and in London, I guess.
Well, in books like the Outlander, I almost said Outlander, or The Witches, where she goes back in time.
Yeah.
What was that called? Circle of Witches?
Oh, Discovery of Witches.
Discovery of Witches. These are really historical. They're historically accurate. These writers have researched a lot to make going back in time very, very historically accurate. Outlander involves the Scottish uprising against the English, and so if you like history, you can choose history novels. I also like to read a lot of nonfiction just to learn different ideas and stuff. I read a lot of philosophy, but I also like reading things like Dave Ramsey. Here's the thing. Any knowledge you can get in life will help you form better and more educated opinions. You should read the Bible at least once just to learn a history of the Jews, even though it's, storyfied. But you learn a lot of history, and you can learn a lot of what started the Middle East conflict that we know now, unless you know that history, and then take that from there and read more about the peoples mentioned in the Bible, and then you can figure out this is why they still hate each other and want to kill each other.
Well, if you piggyback on Outlander, it also goes into the American Revolution. So it starts with the Scottish Uprising. They end up in North America, and it's during the time of the American Revolution.
Freedom.
Yeah, it was pretty good. But that's very true. I think reading does depend. I mean, here's the thing. I think you reading anything is important. But it opens you up to new perspectives of ideas, because a lot of these writers are bringing their knowledge into their lives and putting it on a piece of paper, and you're learning it from a different perspective that you may not have otherwise.
I mean, a lot of writers, I think any writing you read, fiction-wise, has the writer in it. So whether it's a certain character that they've picked to really, personify themselves, or they actually write themselves into the book.
Are you talking about Stephen King?
No, some writers, you know that the character is a lot of themselves. Like
Stephanie Meyer wrote herself as Bella in Twilight. I mean, that's an example, but that was
and like
her
different
idea.
Personality traits. Like when I've done a lot of thinking about this. I think you can see a lot of J.K. Rowling in Ron Weasley. Even though she says that's her least favorite character, I think we don't like the things that reflect us the most. But the way Ron is very, set in his opinions, and he's also such a good guy, but he's not at the same time. I think that's reflective of her. I think your writers write themselves into all their characters.
Well, it's like
this is my dark side. This is my fantasy side.
Well, I was going to say, like, Ron has a lot of insecurities about not being good enough.
Right. And when you think that she was almost homeless and wrote this in a coffee shop with, a baby in the baby carriage.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like reading, and why Chris likes reading, and Becky. It really does build your knowledge base and helps you create an educated opinion.
It always interests me when people say they don't like reading. Like, it's hard, maybe, there's different reasons why, but like just the idea that it's such a boring idea.
Well, some people can't read or retain knowledge
right.
really well.
Which I get with that.
Yeah.
And that'd be boring as shit if you couldn't remember shit.
Right. And maybe Audible books are just too boring for them. Yeah. But just give it a try.
Well, some people are visual learners, like watching pictures on the screen and stuff like that.
They'd rather watch the movie.
But like in general, like the idea that like I hate reading is super boring. I mean, other than the fact that maybe like you have that learning disability or something to that effect, I feel like you're just not meeting you're not finding a book that really catches you. Because I was the same way when I was little, and then I found Animorphs, and then that was basically it. But I was in 3rd grade.
I have a really good friend now who doesn't read. Like, reading's not really his gig, and it's not because he's dumb. He's not stupid. Yeah. I got him on Audible, and he's just devouring books on tape.
Yeah.
Because he loves it.
Well, it's the same with my aunt. My aunt has MS, so she can't read like she used to.
Yeah.
But she uses Audible, and she will read or listen to books all day.
Like 6 books a week.
That was the only way. Yeah. Honestly, that was the only way I could do Wheel of Time for a long time, was to listen to it.
I actually just signed up for Audible so I can listen to the books, because I'm caught up on No Sleep Podcast. So I'm like, well,
we are not sponsored by Audible, by the way.
No, we're not. But Audible, if you want to reach out, feel free.
Yeah. We do love your platform.
I use Nook, Kindle, I use the Apple Books, and I use Audible. That's how much I read. Like right now I'm reading 8 books. Usually I finish one at a time, but I'm reading Gideon the Ninth, Green Rider, The Ancient Ones, Sweet and Bitter Magic, Witches of Ash and Ruin. I think you can pretty see where this is going with me. Cost and Managerial Accounting. Cost Accounting for Dummies, Dies the Fire, and Penthouse. So, I mean...
What was that last one?
A Penthouse.
A Penthouse.
Penthouse Letters, yes.
Oh, Penthouse Letters.
And it's an Audible book. And I told Becky, I'm like, I don't even know how I got this. It's on Apple Books. Do they just give you that as a welcome gift?
I highly doubt they gave you Penthouse Letters.
Yeah, but I don't remember.
Gift.
It's straight. I wouldn't have downloaded a straight one.
But you're still listening to it.
No, I didn't. It still says new. I haven't opened it.
Let's see. I think I'm rocking. I read I have to have a paper book and a digital book, just because like some days at work, especially if I'm in court and I'm waiting to do court, I have to like.
Oh
sit
yeah,
there
I've got
read.
tons of paper books.
So like right now I finished Spinning Silver, which was like a fantastic book, by the way. The Iron Flower, Bone Shard Daughter, The Bear and the Nightingale, Small Favors, Nothing But Blackened Teeth, which is kind of a really freaky book. and The Dead in the Dark.
The
I read a
horror
lot of
books,
like
I
fantasy horror.
I prefer like
Those are the horror books she enjoys.
Yeah, anything with a kitty.
Also, if you're listening and haven't noticed that Bobby's not here, it's because he's illiterate and we didn't let him come.
That's true. Bobby said that his favorite book is Bussy Files, and that was about it. What were you saying? I know you're like distracted with Cat.
Well, I've got a lot of actual like paper books as well. They're kept up on my bookshelf and on my bedstand, so I'm not even getting into those. But however you like to read, whatever your reason for wanting to read.
Yeah.
It's also good just to relax your mind.
Yeah. I really did not enjoy reading when I was in elementary school. Legit did not enjoy it. And I think it really did come down to like the books that they made you read. And we also talked about it was probably because I could read at a higher level, but I was still reading like really fucking stupid books.
Like Dick and Jane books.
Yes. But book fairs, dude, that was the shit. I ended up getting like Animorphs there the first time. Listen, don't laugh. Animorphs, I was 9, okay? You can't really judge that for, I can't read like Tale of Two Cities at 9 years old. I could try.
I read Treasure Island at 8, so yes, you can.
Did you read Tale of Two Cities?
I read everything they would give me in the library.
Well, what I'm saying is, like, if you're not engaged in it, I just like sci-fi when I was younger. So there was not a lot
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
No.
I read at such a high level because my sister just taught me. I think also when you have older siblings that want to play teacher and like they would force me.
Yeah.
Like I'm not kidding. We'd play school and I'm like I don't want to play school, but I knew math and I didn't know how to tie my shoe. I almost failed kindergarten because of that.
Well, I've told you like before that my first grade teacher told my mom that I was dyslexic. Mm-hmm. And I was actually put in a lower reading level because she was convinced. She told my mom, she's going to have a learning disability for the rest of her life. You're going to have to like make sure she learns how to read good or something because she's not going to succeed. My mom was like, what are you fucking talking about? So it wasn't until I think 7th grade when my mom saw her again and she saw my first grade teacher and she was like, how is Becky doing in school? And she's like, she just finished Lord of the Rings. Like, you have to have people who are going to encourage you and not put you down to learn to read.
I had a good first grade teacher and kindergarten teachers because they recognized that I was reading at such a higher level. So a bus would come pick up 3 of us and take us to the middle school. Mm-hmm. So in first grade, I was going up to 5th grade.
See, that's how my teachers were. The principal was super cool, and he had known my dad before, so they would come to my first and second grade class, and I would be done with my work, and the principal would come in there. Shout out to Mr. Spears, keeping it real. He would come in there and just be like, hey, do you want to go to the library? And I'd be like, yes, I do. And he would just let me go spend the rest of the day in the library reading because I'm done with everything.
Yeah.
It's really hard, too, like, not having that kind of encouragement, I think, is part of it. I think a lot of, like, when I was younger, and I would say probably about 3rd to 4th grade is when I was really encouraged to read, but having teachers who are like, you have to read Anne of Green Gables and these kind of books and blah, 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 because that's what young ladies read. And being like, this is the most fucking boringest shit.
Little Women? Oh,
yes.
my God.
Great. Like, Little Women was by far my most hated book because we read it like twice, I think, in elementary school. And I was like, this is so boring. So your perspective is that's the only books that are out there. And
yeah, that would suck.
Yeah, that really did
But
suck.
again, my mom, when I was 1 and 2 and 3, like little, she was reading to me and holding books.
Oh, yeah.
By the time I was 3, she was buying me books because I knew how to read children's books at that point.
Yeah.
So she was getting me children's books. By the time I was 5 and 6, I could read like young adult novels.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed reading, and I just love to read everything. Like, I just remember so many times being in elementary school and just sitting in the library and just grabbing book after book after book after book and just reading everything.
My mom was the same. My mom really started encouraging that when my brother would go to speech therapy way back in the day. You know, Barnes & Noble was down the street. And every week she would give me $20. And I could go into Barnes & Noble and pick out 2 books. When you could buy 2 books for $20. And every week I would buy 2 books. And by Friday, this would be on a Tuesday. By Friday, I'd be done.
Yep.
And Mom was like, I can't buy you. Like, we can't go to the bookstore every week. I was like, but... You know, now I have something I enjoy. And that was because it was like the book fair at school and stuff like that. You know, you find these books that are just much more interesting than, you know, Anne of Green Gables. Which, no problem with Anne of Green Gables if you like it. It's just not my cup of tea.
It's for some people and it's not for other people.
It's a good coming of age story for little girls. I understand that. I also didn't enjoy it.
I do think I read the book Wuthering Heights too young. And I read Cujo too young.
Cujo was real bad to read at that age.
I don't think, you know, 8 and 9 years old were old
So I
enough to
remember
understand those books.
in second grade, I found Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes.
And it was 396.4 SCH in our school's library in the, God, where it was located in the Dewey Decimal System. And I'll remember that till I die because I checked that book out constantly.
Yeah.
I just kept reading it and rereading it and trying to draw the art in it. And just like, then Mr. Spears called my dad and was like, I don't know if this is for a second grader. And my dad's like, it's in an elementary school library. He's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why do you have these books in the library?
Well, here's the thing. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was also at our book fair.
Yeah,
like,
it
that's
was the
how I got it
best.
the first time was I saw it, and I was like, oh, that looks terrifying. And it gave me nightmares.
Oh,
I would think I was, like, in second grade.
I kept checking that book out.
Yeah.
Every time I turn it back in and be like, I get this again? Like, why? You already read it. I'm like, yeah, but it's so good.
It was the
That's so
same
good.
when I was in elementary school. I got the Amityville Horror, and that was
Yeah.
definitely not appropriate for a fifth grader because it's like all the stuff that happens in the story, and you're like, at the time, it was touted as being real.
So, one of my friends, when I was growing up, one of my best friends, his mom was from, she was the neighbor of where that house was when they were younger. That's why they left. Like, they literally left New York to come down here because of her parents were neighbors up there. And they were like, nope,
Yeah.
I'm not dealing with any of this.
We don't want none of this. I remember in elementary school I read Foxfire, and maybe those were a little, maybe should have waited a bit for those two because, yeah, the Foxfire series.
If you were,
And I read a lot of fables.
Oh yeah, I loved fables. I will say, I think both of us. I think every 11-year-old girl has accidentally stumbled onto B.C. Andrews.
Read all of them.
Yeah.
Every single one. And let me tell you, the way to confuse your sexuality is to read V.C. Andrews' books. Very shocking.
I've never read one of them.
Don't.
Yeah, don't. I
They're
mean,
like-
it really is pubescent girl. Well, and I also read all the Ramona books.
Yeah.
Like, as
Are
you
you
would.
there, God? It's me, Margaret.
Loved it. Loved it.
No, V.C. Andrews was known for its pedophilia and incest. That's what it was.
Huh.
Like I said, way to confuse your sexuality. Now, Ramona Quimby and like the Are You There, the Beverly Cleary books, and I really did like those, and I liked Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, because it is a legit like what being a 12-year-old girl is like.
Yeah.
Even though I was like 8 when I read it, but when she would do the I must increase my bust, I tried all that was mentioned in the book, and that's how I got these. Thank you, Beverly Cleary.
Never read any of them.
Well, I
I
found
don't think you really would enjoy like books geared to 12-year-old
No.
girls.
Nope.
Well, and then when I was 9, I found the Sweet Valley High books.
So
I loved them.
I tried those, could not deal with it. I did the Boxcar Children, if you remember
I
those.
read every Boxcar Children. Oh,
I will
my
say
gosh.
there was a good link between Sweet Valley High and I was like, oh, I don't really like these Boxcar Children. I was like, okay, these are all right. But then it went like Nancy Drew and the
Nancy
Hardy Boys.
Drew.
Those are all
and I
more-
was like,
I couldn't.
I got there.
I didn't like Nancy Drew. I didn't really even like the Hardy Boys.
Yeah, they were a little old-fashioned.
Encyclopedia Brown. Like
Yeah.
Oh,
all
I
those-
loved Encyclopedia Brown. Okay, you just mentioned one of my favorite series.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was so bored.
Yeah. Well, I read The Bear Went Over the Mountain, and then that led to Boxcar Children, which led to the others.
I will say, like, I think those are just books that everybody will say at some point they have read at
Yeah, they've
least
had to
one in their
touch.
life because they're just such classically young adult novels. Like, now you hear, like, all of these, like, weird fantasy novels that are really popular in young adult, but everybody at some point grows up with, like, The Babysitter's Club, The Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew. And it really, like, Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys just led me to more mysteries. Like, oh, okay, this is nice. It's kind of boring. Let's see what else there's out
See,
there.
and I was always bored by like the Sherlock Holmes stuff.
Yeah.
Like
It's very dry.
I get it, but it's just so goddamn boring.
Well, when I discovered Stephen King at 9, I never looked back.
Yeah,
From
that was
Stephen
it.
King
That's the
was
truth.
Dean Koontz and what's his face, Saul. Is it John Saul?
Yeah, John Saul.
I
Yeah.
will say, yeah, that's true. I think like Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, like
You-
transitioned into like
yeah.
Agatha Christie and then into Stephen King.
See, I got
Yeah.
R.L. Stein in second grade,
Yes.
and I started
Oh.
buying every one of those books.
He went around when I was a kid.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah. But I probably would have read it.
Yeah, I read
if he had
every.
been.
I owned them all, and then it went from R.L. Stein straight to Stephen King once I got through all his, and then
And then to Dean Koontz.
I think you're right because I think I did R.L. Stein, but I was into Fear Street more than Goosebumps, and Fear Street was more geared to like horror,
Yeah.
paranormal, and it was more geared to older kids.
well, R.L. Stein tried to make like adult books.
yes,
But it was pretty not great. Once you got above the age of about 12, it
Yeah.
was just unreadable.
Yeah.
I'm about to say
Yeah.
Fear Street was pretty gnarly for like kids who are supposed to be middle school
Yeah.
age. It was pretty bad.
I have to tell you a funny story about Goosebumps. And I think I've told you before,
Yeah.
but I was babysitting my nephew. I used to live with my sister, and when I moved out on my own, I'd still go back. Either my nephews would come to my house, or I'd go over to her house to take them to school on Monday. But they were out, and I don't remember where. It was like a Friday night, and Chris was asleep. He always wanted to watch Goosebumps as he went to bed, and his favorite was The Werewolf of Fever Swamp.
Sure.
So one of my big fears is werewolves. Surprise, I have another fear. And I'm sitting there and I'm just like biting my nails and like, oh, this shit's so scary. And he's sleeping in his Goosebumps bed sheets. But I go out in the living room and a little while later I hear, "Aunt Angie," and I go in there and he's like, he said, "There's something under my bed." I was like, "Well, don't call me. Get out of there."
The proper adult response. Run!
He's like, "Will you check?" I'm like, "No." I was like, I said, "Jump from the bed to the door." So my sister gets home and she's like, "Why is Chris out here on the couch with you?" I'm like, "There's something under his bed, okay?" She's like, "Not the proper response at all." She was like, "Now he's gonna think something's under his bed."
This
And I'm
is
like,
legit like how parenting would go for us. You'd be like, "If there's something,
Yeah.
Mommy, there's something in the closet. Get the fuck out of
Run
the bed.
away from
Get the
it."
fuck out of here then. We're not gonna
"Will
stay
you
here."
check under my bed for monsters?"
No.
No.
You better put your foot down and see if it gets you. Then we'll know if there is one or
The
not.
good news is Uncle Chris is going to buy like those weird monster hands and just have one sticking out from under the bed. So when Angie has to go check it, it's just a nightmare come to life.
Oh my
You
Jesus.
could do that without kids. You could just do it now, and she would still freak the fuck
It's
out.
way better if there's a kid involved.
Okay,
It
here's,
is true.
Here's the thing though. Angie is still scared that if I have my feet hanging off the bed, she's like, "Get your foot off the bed." I said, "What are you worried about?" She's like, "Somebody's gonna
I'll
grab
wake up
it."
and like my legs are hanging off the bed. Like I'll wake up like torso on the bed and feet on the floor. I don't know why or how. We don't ask questions. And I'm like, "What was I dragged off?"
So I was worried about that when I was little, like I guess 5 or 6. I guess I had a nightmare that something was under my bed. And I screamed, and my dad came in there, and he's like, "It doesn't matter if it's under your bed. If something's going to grab you, it can come out from under there. Don't call me again." And after since then, I was like, oh, I guess it could just murder me if it wants, so why even worry? The end. And it
That's
fixed
real
it.
good parenting.
My dad was no nonsense, none of that bullshit.
Yeah,
When
my
I-
dad was the same way. He's like, "There's no such thing as like ghosts, Becky. Just go back to bed."
Yep.
Actually, I don't ever think I got
I grew up
scared.
in the country, and we had one of the street lights. You're required to put one
Yeah.
far out in the country on your yard, I guess, for emergency. I don't know why you're
So they can
required
find
to-
you, yeah.
Yeah. So, but my bedroom, the light shone right into it. So I would stay up pretty much all night reading. And I remember I was reading The Sword of Shannara. The first book is quite scary when the things are after him.
Yeah.
Like those little black.
Oh, damn, third down
Critter
sword
things?
of Shannara. Damn.
Well, I think I was probably 9 or 10 when I was reading this one.
You were
And-
reading Sword of Shannara at 10?
Yeah, Becky, we were reading a lot of stuff. So I'm reading by the moonlight and the street light. And I had pulled the curtains too because I didn't want to get called because my mama didn't sleep much. And if I were called, it was ass whooping, like hands down. And I heard this noise tapping at my window. At the same time, he's in this hotel room with something tapping at the window, and it's that critter thing. There was a tapping on my window. So I'm like, nothing's there. The one time in my life I was going to be brave. And look, I open it up. There's a cow because we had cows. And it had gotten out of the fence. And in the middle of the night, it was just standing at my window like, "Moo, bitch." Nearly died. I was so scared. There was screaming. I got an ass whooping for being awake. And I'm like, but the cow is out. So then we had to get up in the middle of the night, get the cows in. She's like, "Why are you awake at 3 a.m?
Cal woke me up.
Yeah, the fucking cow.
Angie didn't lie to her mama, so she would have just said I was reading.
I read a book. I used to get in trouble at school, not paying attention to class. I'm like, if I have an A
What's the
and I'm
difference?
reading in your class, what is your fucking problem with it?
I know. It never made sense when people were like, "You can't read in class." It's like, aren't you supposed to be encouraging my education?
Yeah, I'm not talking. Like, I can do this math in my sleep. Just let me read. Otherwise, I'm going to cause problems.
So that's what, when I was younger, they used to get me to try to help, like, the other kids, because I'd be doing my work. I'm like, "Hey, can you help James with his fucking math?" And I'm like, "No, he doesn't understand math. I can't teach this at 2nd grade. Like, what?"
Yeah, I don't want to.
So the principal would I just wasn't good at that. Like, I'd be like, "Yeah, 7 times 2 is 14. He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "That's how math works, you idiot. What are
Yeah.
you bothering
I mean,
me
it's
for?"
like
Yeah.
it's like in any high school. I got in a lot of trouble my senior year, which is funny, because I had a teacher who was so old school. If you if you had the answer but you did not show the work the proper way, you got marked real bad. So I was at one point like almost failing math, trigonometry, and my mom was like pissed. But it was mostly because like what was going on with the work, so she had tried to get me out of the class. But at the end of the year, when you did your final, you didn't have to show your work. It was just a multiple choice thing. I got a 99, and she was like, well, why can't you do this through the entire year? I was like, I did.
See, that's what...
You dumb bitch.
That was one of the things that used to irk me in math was like, they're like, show your work. I'm like, why?
Why?
If I get to the right answer, what's the difference?
Right, I can explain to you in my head how... It's like your mind calculates so much faster than your thoughts keep
different.
up with.
Yeah.
It just knows.
Well, like...
You're never going to have a calculator in your
when
pocket.
we were doing, like, fractions, and they're like, express 2/3 as a decimal, like 0.666 repeating, or 0.66667 forever, whatever.
Yeah.
They're like, well, how do you know that? I'm like, because that's what 2/3 means. What do you mean? That you asked me a question, I gave you the answer.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know why that's how math works. That's just how it works.
Yeah. Because your mind just knows.
Yeah.
It's been, a long time since I've been in high school, and I don't think I've ever shown my work for anything.
I can calculate how much time based on traffic and how we're going to get, like when I told you and Bobby 5 to 8 minutes, and it was pretty much 8 minutes. And I couldn't do that word problem. If you're going 60 miles an hour...
I can do those word problems. I just know, I read through it, and
know
the
the
answer's there.
answer.
And I'm like, okay.
But I can't tell you formulaically
But it's
how
because
it works.
your brain thinks differently than other people. You shouldn't be punished for that. It's stupid.
It's the same reason I couldn't quite figure out formal geometry. I mean,
well, that's what Kat was asking
geometry.
me last night. He was like, do you know the Pythagorean theorem? I'm like, a squared b squared equals c squared. He's like, how do you know that? I'm like, it's fucking math, bro.
Yeah.
What are you talking about? The Egyptians knew this.
It's just math.
4,000 years ago.
And a lot of times, if you think about like the Pythagorean theorem or anything like that, like it's a word problem in and of itself.
Well,
it's not just numbers. It's a problem that can be
algebraic
formula.
But my brain just plugs in the numbers.
Yeah.
Like, and that's what he's like. And that's why I was always good at that kind of stuff, because I know my squares pretty well.
I was the same way.
And you know what
in
helps
algebra.
math, and what math helps is reading.
Yeah.
Because the cadence of a sentence is a math equation.
Yeah.
Just like the cadence of music, it's just math.
It's math.
It's math.
It's true. Like I always did great in algebra. I also did really well in chemistry because a lot of it was just math, but it was a word problem.
Yeah, it's double valence replacement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2 minus 3 couple times.
But it's almost similar. It was the way I used to describe it is like doing a chemistry problem was almost similar to creating a sentence. Like you have certain rules that go into creating a sentence. It's the same as creating a chemistry problem.
See, and chemistry was always easy for me because you never got into advanced. Nothing was more advanced than 2s or 3s.
Yeah.
Really. That was it.
Yeah.
Even nuclear decay, you're looking at really 2s and 3s. You're like, okay, what's so difficult?
Yeah. It's when it gets into
that's
like
what numerology is. It just breaks it down to its simplest part.
Yeah.
And then you put it back together and you got your big numbers.
That's how I always looked at math. Is like, no math is really super hard, but it's a bunch of small, easy problems. Mm-hmm. And if you can figure out the small, easy problems, you can figure out the hard problems.
I hated geometry, though. Geometry was outside of my purview.
People talk about... What do they call the new way they do math?
Common Core.
They talk shit about Common Core, but I like the way they do it.
Some of it's okay, some of it's bad.
Yeah, but it teaches your mind to think differently instead of linear.
Well, I don't think most people that are, like, good at math think linear regardless. I think when people are... Like, when I'm doing math at work, when I have to figure out equations that we have to use... I can break it down in my head faster than I can write it down.
Yeah.
And I can shortcut around it. So if it's like 28 plus 47, my brain automatically goes 20 plus 40 is 60, 7 plus 8 is 15, 75. Mm-hmm. Like, that's just how my brain breaks it down.
Yeah, it's the same way for, like, a lot of times I have to sit there and think about it for a second, but it's because my brain is having to wrap it around in its own way to get there. But, like, school was just hard. Math was hard just because of you had to conform to what your teacher wanted to teach you, which sucked.
And they want you to do it their way.
I think that's why I think that's why we did better in history a lot of times, because history there was no, I mean, you can interpret history the way it is, but regular old history in grade school was like, when did the Civil War happen?
Yeah.
In like 1860.
A lot of math is just memorization too, which is why I think the Common Core
started, like, a lot of it started in 1860. It wasn't the officially declared
a lot of it
a
started
war.
in 1619. The first shots were fired at Fort Sumter in 1861.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying. Okay, we just don't argue about that.
What I think is interesting too about that is that people went on a picnic to watch the battle.
Oh, I know.
Well, they would watch all of them, even the Battle of Atlanta and all the Atlanta campaigns.
Yeah.
People would just show up and watch.
Mm-hmm. And they were like, this will be over. This one battle is going to determine it all. And then suddenly it's like, oh no, we need to get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, it's so different thinking about it. And like at Christmas time, you would stop fighting just so you could go home to your family or eat with your people.
There was a book, one of my favorite books, like you checked out Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. It was a book called Rifles for Wadey, and it was about the Civil War. And there was a Union soldier who went undercover on the Confederate side. And he was like, it was such a good book because he's like, these guys aren't bad.
No.
And they're not fighting for slavery. They're just fighting for their home. Like, a lot of people don't, like,
So
their point was not.
I get into this because I do a lot of Civil War stuff. I don't think the entire Confederacy was evil. I think the higher ups were evil, but most
The
of
politicians.
most of the people fighting were piss poor
Yeah.
idiot farm boys,
Right.
who were told the North was coming to take their land.
Exactly.
They knew no better.
They're going to steal your land.
It was all
forced industrialization.
I was like, yeah, exactly. They were going to force industrialization of the area.
Now, do I think the generals knew what the fuck they were doing? Absolutely. Do I
Well,
think the
it's like-
politicians knew what they were doing? Absolutely.
Well, let's look at 2022.
Yeah. Do I think?
Most people who are fighting at the ground war, like let's say Russia,
Yeah.
the only idea they know is that Ukraine bad, we need to kill them. When you know that upward politicians have more of an agenda than anybody else, so it's the same shit 200 years later.
But most of the and I get into this with people a lot. I don't think Confederacy was a good thing, but most of the Confederate war troops, they're fighters. Most of those guys didn't have slaves, and they sure as hell weren't fighting for slavery because they were piss poor farm boys.
They couldn't afford slaves.
They were basically pawns that were trying to keep slavery in place
Yeah.
for the higher ups.
Yep.
And again, they fought for what they thought was going to happen, not what they thought
Right.
was right. They thought the North was coming to take their land.
Right.
Because when Texas and Arizona were coming in to the U.S., and they had to choose whether they're coming in as a slave state or free state, Congress would have been swung towards industrialism or agriculturalism based on that. So you had, and then the industrial approach was way different than what we were used to here.
Yeah.
So people were told, hey, they just came in under the Union as an industrial state, as a free state. So this means they're going to come take your land.
Yeah.
And they're going to take away your entire heritage and history.
Yeah.
And, you know,
It's your perception of what's going on. Like,
I mean, and to be fair, that is still the same scare tactics used today
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
vote Republican.
But we don't think about, like, you talking about 1860s. If you were a piss poor farm boy on a farm in middle of bumfuck Alabama,
you don't know any better.
not only there's no way for you to know better, there's no
No.
communication with the outside world. Your communication is probably church on Sunday, and that's about it.
That's
what
why-
your preacher tells you.
Well, that's why a lot of times, like now, it's interesting to like see it from the perspective of our time, like in the 21st century, where information is
Instant.
so readily available. So, we can know something is going on within hours in a country that's across an ocean that we will never have any interaction with, other than maybe buying their goods. But back then, you know, what you knew was probably within 5 miles of where you lived.
Even then, if you couldn't see it or hear it, you probably didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I mean, if there was a fire in the next town, unless word got out,
You know.
you didn't know about it. Like, so there's no way that most of the Confederate troops would have known about, anything going on up north. There's just no way.
Right.
So, like, treating those people like they were informed about what was going on it's unfair and just wrong. Now, holding the higher-ups and the politicians to a different standard, they knew what the fuck was going on,
Yeah.
and they were just a bunch of fucking assholes.
Yeah.
They can all eat a dick. But the rest of them were...
That's why, though, reading is so important.
Well, yeah.
Right. Even if you don't want to read books, just pick up a magazine, read the articles in Playboy.
So I have...
Some good articles.
Yeah.
I have maps from the Civil War, because that's what I'm into. And you can tell, even on the cartography side, where the northern maps were very nice. They were drawn out. Cities were all pretty well where they should have been. Distance and size were pretty relative with what they should have been. The southern maps looked like they were drawn by me in an opium haze.
That's because literacy was so rampant, and because the North historically was much more educated than, because really, like we've talked about, the South was much more agricultural based. You didn't go to school to like become a doctor or anything. I mean, people would, but you were working the farm with your family.
But we think about farms, and we think about it differently. Like, we think of farm now, like, you know, you have 2 or 3 acres of corn, whatever, that's your farm. That's not how this operated.
No.
Where I live, the city I live in, back during the Civil War days, was 2 farms. And that's a lot of property for
Well, I was about to say,
farms.
where my parents live out is historic because...
Oh, no, I know. I've dug up some of the slave quarters out there.
Just they have... There's probably like 40 or 50 houses out there, and they're all on 5 to 10 to 15 acres plot. It was one plantation at the time.
And across the street was where the plantation house was.
Yeah, so it's weird because I think a lot of people who listen to our podcast aren't necessarily from Georgia anyways. Yeah. Or from the United States.
No, they're mostly South Africa, UK, and Canada.
Yeah.
Thank you guys. Shout out.
Yeah, but you're like...
Worldwide,
baby. You really
baby.
are getting... turn the book lesson into a history lesson. But you have to understand, like, when we see it from our perspective, it's like... It's just massive. It's like you just can't really describe exactly what...
It'd be like
it's hundreds of hectares.
Imagine all of Cape Town being one plantation.
Yeah.
If you're in South Africa. That's how that works here. It wasn't that there were...
Or literally the country of Ireland is a plantation.
All of it. It's one big plantation. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that work there, but it's just one big plantation.
And that's why a lot of people... I mean, like, we're not defending what happened.
No.
But, like, that's why a lot of people were so against it because you were basically taking their entire livelihood away. Hey, they were wrong the way they did it in the beginning. But when you have to tell people, like, you have to change the manner in which you have worked generations, people aren't going to take well to it.
No. Well, what Robert E. Lee, I think it was him, and... Jefferson Davis asked is, if you free the slaves, what next? What is your plan?
What do you do
to house, feed, pay? What is your plan for them so they don't starve to death and be homeless? Like, what is your plan? You can't just suddenly be like, hey, and we saw that after the end of the war. What are they gonna do?
Well, that's because
where are they gonna go? What are they gonna do?
Part of that was what happened with Lincoln, though. Like, especially because I think really what you saw was Lincoln had a plan. Lincoln had a plan. Andrew Jackson came in and said, fuck all y'all. Like, it's really what it comes down to. Like, we don't give a shit. Figure it out on yourself.
Well, and here's the thing. Lincoln had a plan for reparations. When you hear people today, African-American community, talk about they want reparations, it was so we wouldn't see the systemic racism we see now. Because whenever you hear this, think back to after Civil War.
Yeah.
Imagine yourself a slave. You've better or worse, and I think it's all worse. You were housed and clothed, and then suddenly you're free.
But there's no law.
Nowhere to go.
But there's no actual structure as to what happens to you.
No jobs.
Well, not only that, you're not educated for the most part.
Exactly. No education.
So what ended up happening was it was basically one of three things. They either went north to industrialized cities and worked there. So you got like Detroit, Chicago, where a lot of freed slaves went
and you
to.
get there and you realize, oh, these people didn't actually mostly support my freedom.
No, they supported it in theory. They didn't want you coming to their town.
Yeah.
Right, you're not going to take our jobs.
Yeah. So you had a mass exodus to the northern industrial cities. You had the other option was a bunch of freed slaves stayed on and worked for their former masters.
Right.
As basically
indentured servants.
Yeah,
but not with the indentured part.
Yeah. Not slaves was pretty close to slavery.
Yeah.
It
was just by word of what it was.
Yeah,
it was a slavery.
Piss poor sharecropping.
Like, yeah.
It's close to slavery. It's not technically slavery.
It's freedom, quote unquote, in theory.
You might as well be a slave. Like, it's kind of the same thing. The third option was some of them went off and started their own communities because they did have knowledge of farming.
Yeah.
They knew how to grow things. They knew how to run a farm.
Right.
So they did. They went off and started their own communities, and some of them, I mean, you've got the Gullah Geechee here in Georgia.
Yeah.
Basically, they were all ex-slaves that were like, you know what, the hell with this. We're going to do our own thing. And their descendants can still run those farms. They still sell red beans and black beans and rice, and they still farm.
Yeah.
Awesome. I mean, now it's more historical when we look at it, but that's what they did. They went off and did what they knew.
Right. And if you want to know more about this, pick up a autobiography on Frederick Douglass or read his writings, because he was livid.
Yeah.
He was so upset after the war, what happened, the breakdown we had.
Really, it always came down to the fact that there was no plan for what would happen to all these people. So you basically relegated people who had no education, people who had no other knowledge than these
good luck.
Good luck. Figure it out. By the way, you owe us money for the war.
To be fair, in the South, pretty much everybody. I mean, you had a lot of ignorant white people too, which doesn't
Well, and Reconstruction in the South wasn't great.
Yeah,
for
no.
anybody.
No, it definitely did not
Exactly
go well.
what was feared.
Well, and that
started the war.
Well,
happened.
the Reconstruction and what happened after the war literally led to Jim Crow.
Yes.
Like, there is a huge,
Absolutely.
direct line, and that is why you see that historical systematic racism in the South, because there was nobody to address it once the war
Right.
ended. They were just like,
That was
hey,
it.
you're free. Good luck.
Good luck. Good luck.
Yeah.
Oh, and we're going to keep you still afraid of everything, so we're going to develop this group of white hats and cloaks and come scare the fuck out of
That
you.
happened kind of right after the Civil War. It was So, and I'm torn on the Klan because you get like directly after the war, it wasn't necessarily against any specific race. It was more of a like a veterans club.
Yeah.
But then it transformed.
But then
It was like a
changed.
bikers club
But it's
that
like
becomes.
it's like the Nazi
The Hells
symbol
Angels.
the Nazi symbol got morphed into something that was definitely not what
No.
it was meant to be at the very beginning of it.
And I mean, you look at the early 1900s with the swastika. We were putting out a bunch of stuff because it was a good luck symbol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
You're seeing that now too with a lot of Viking runes because a lot of like white supremacy
supremacists. The
groups
Thor.
are taking it,
Mjolnir.
and it's like these are historically like thousands of years old symbols that
Doesn't
now
matter.
but now that people are like putting it to that's what's being
Peppy.
marred with it. Yeah, true.
you look at Peppy the Pig or Peppy the Frog. That's what they did to it.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying the Klan is a good thing because it is not. It
Yeah.
is
No,
its current incarnation.
what it is
or
now,
what it
gotta go.
was in the 60s and 70s. I think it's probably mostly a joke now. I don't think who
Yeah.
gives a fuck.
I told you I joined the Army when I was 16, and the first thing I had to do was the bus came and got us from school. It was the last Klan march in Atlanta, and I had to go stand in riot gear because they called the National Guard out.
Right.
And I was just like, oh, I should be in history class.
My aunt grew up in West Virginia, and she said, I think the last one she remembers the Klan marching in like their 4th of July parade was like 91.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's mildly terrifying when Vanilla Ice is relevant.
I know. Well,
Yeah.
we had one a few
What?
years ago here.
Sorta.
It was really lame though. Like more people showed up to just like protest it than
wasn't-
like the 17 people who showed up that were
And they
part
were
of it.
late. They
It
didn't
wasn't
even
like a Klan rally. It was just like a white supremacist
It was
Yeah.
white supremacy. Yeah.
bullshit. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying there aren't white supremacists. I'm saying the Klan is like an organization. Like, who gives a fuck?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take your robes and go fuck yourself, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are much more educated this day and age. I mean, you still have a lot of really stupid fucking people in the world.
At this point, it has to be voluntary.
Yes. That's my big thing is you are voluntarily ignorant. You have an idea about what's been told to you. Go on the internet and look it up.
Right. Read some books. Read about Frederick Douglass. Read Abraham Lincoln.
And if you
just
don't-
read about the Civil War.
If you don't want to read a book, go on fucking Wikipedia.
Here's my thing.
Read the
is-
Federalist Papers. Just read your history so you can understand today. If you enjoy conversations like this, Chris has recommended A Brief History of Time.
That's mostly for physics and black holes in space. Just because
If you're curious about what the future might look like,
there
or
is no future. The black
everything
hole in the
else.
center of our
That's
universe is
it.
going to swallow everything.
This is why, and I think it's gonna be sooner than later.
Yeah, everybody's thought that.
And Becky has recommended a scary book.
I recommended Hex. That's a really good book. It's a horror novel. It's about a witch that haunts a city.
And then I recommended the Dark Tower series because I think you can see a lot of current events in books like that.
Also, my favorite sci-fi series, or whatever you want to call it, is The Dark Tower. It's not even close either.
It's definitely readable. I think they're all good. Let's read them all.
Just read.
But go vote in our Discord. Which
Yep,
one? We're
we're
gonna
gonna-
do a book club.
Yep, and we're all going to pick one. Do it once a month.
That's right. That's why we did
I
this
feel
podcast.
like A Brief History of Time is going to take a lot longer than a month.
To
Nah,
read?
you just read it.
Yeah.
Quantum physics is fascinating. I've read that book maybe twice.
I remember reading it.
I read it because I wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah,
Stephen Hawking, Alta Ford.
we gotta go.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, love you.